They're just not in the schools, praise God, but they're on the streets.
Yes, we do. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Looks like we're waiting on a couple more people to join.
Where's a good place to go buy a breakfast at? Not that I'm going to go buy one, but I sure would like to have a good breakfast that I didn't have to cook. I was going to come to Dr. Hunter's house.
My specialty for breakfast is waffles, so you can come for waffles.
Yeah, yeah. I accept inviting myself.
I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm having some technical stuff, so if I cut out, I'm sorry. I might have to call back in. Here in my neighborhood. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to get started just with the greeting and good morning and go through a few things. And hopefully by the time we get to attendance, we will have a few more people that have joined. If we're unable to be quorum, I just want to note that we will not be able to focus on the items on the agenda that require a vote or anything that's significantly substantial, but we will be able to cover the areas where we have folks that we've invited to come in and speak, okay? Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's Wednesday, October 6, 2021. Please note that you're able to provide public comment. Please register by sending an email to ocpc@seattle.gov with public comment in the subject line. We will also allow community members attending by phone to register for public comment by voice. For those wishing to do so at the beginning of the public comment period, when prompted, please unmute yourself and say your name to register. To be recognized by the chair, speakers must be registered. So if you are unable to attend the remote meeting, please submit written comments again to the Community Police Commission at ocpc@seattle.gov. The Seattle Community Police Commission acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Coast Salish people, including the Muckleshoot, Suquamish, and Duwamish people, past and present. With humility, we recognize how much we benefit from living on their land and water. The Seattle Community Police Commission honors and lifts up these tribes. We hope that this acknowledgement will encourage authentic relationships with urban Native people and all Coast Salish tribes. Co-chairs, if you all would like to begin taking attendance.
Great. Thank you, Director Grant. Can take attendance. Please let me know if you are here. First, Scott is on leave. Prachi Dave, I'm here. Okay. Suzette Dickerson.
Here.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning. Colleen Echohawk. Patricia, Reverend Hunter.
Present.
Good morning.
Morning.
Tasha Johnson. Esther Lucero. Asha Mohammed. Officer Mark Mullins.
Present.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Erica Newman. Dr. Naveen Pinto.
This is Erica. I'm present.
Thank you, Erica. Good morning. Dr. Pinto, are you here? Alina Santillan.
Present.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Joseph Saya.
Present.
Hi, Joseph.
Hi.
Catherine Seibel here. Douglas Wagner.
Here.
Reverend Walden.
Here.
Good morning. Lejea Washington. She may still be on leave. Okay. That is it. Attendance.
So do we have a quorum now?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 10 for quorum. Is that correct, Reverend Walden?
I'm not sure. I think it is. We have 2 people who stepped down, but I would waiting on something from the city attorney's office to let us know what our new quorum is with 2 people stepped down.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm also not sure if you.
Oh,
called me.
awesome. I'm so sorry.
No problem. But I'm here. I don't know if that helps with
Oh, great. Thank
quorum or
you.
not.
Okay, so then we're at 11.
We're good.
We're
Okay,
good. Okay.
Great.
11 is the magic number.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here. It's time to review the agenda and approve. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion to approve the draft agenda?
A motion. This is Joseph.
Thank you, Joseph. Is there a second?
This is
I'll
Suzette, I'll
second.
second.
Thanks, Reverend Hunter. All in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you. The agenda is approved. Let's review the draft minutes and approve. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion to approve the draft minutes?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Reverend. Is there a second?
I'll step away from the chair and second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
This is Suzette, I'm gonna abstain because I was not here.
Thank you, Suzette. So I believe the minutes from our last meeting are approved. Thank you all. And there are no action items to review. Okay. So now we can move into public comment. Public comment is welcomed by the CPC. Individual speakers will be provided up to 2 minutes to comment about items on the meeting agenda. Please do keep in mind that we are so grateful for you to take the time to provide public comment, and we also want to be really sure to remind everyone that public comment must be related to items again on the agenda. So thank you, and Jesse, could you please start public comment? Jesse, are you here?
I had a whole spiel going and forgot to unmute. We have quite a few people signed up for public comment via email, but if you are joining us by phone today and you were not able to email in and would like to sign up for public comment, you can do so by voice right now. Is there anybody on the phone that would like to register for public comment? All right, then we will start with our list of public commenters. The first up is Dr. Howard Gale. Thank you, Dr. Howard Gale. Valerie, you're up.
Good morning. Good morning, CPC. Valerie Schleret here. After 9 years, it's clear that police reform in Seattle is not working as we all hoped it would. If it were, we wouldn't have basically the same rate of police killings in the years since the consent decree as in the years before it. We wouldn't have seen rampant police abuse in the summer of 2020. Our system of accountability is also not working to improve policing. A pending whistleblower complaint, among other things, casts a long shadow of doubt over the integrity of OPA investigations and OPA oversight by the OIG. City Council is now determining the budget for 2022 at $10 million a year. Why should taxpayers fund justification for police abuse through OPA investigations we have reason to believe are not fair and impartial? Biased investigations provide cover for police abuse and bad practice. We need a people's police accountability process, like a participatory budgeting process, where city residents get to determine the kind of accountability system we consent to fund. Because police have the power to harm people or take lives, real police accountability is literally a matter of life or death. CPC support a people's police accountability consultation. It is critically needed and long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Next up on my list is Mark. Mark, are you here? Might be Marcos. Marcos, is that you? Or have you signed up for public comment? All right, we'll come back. Jennifer?
Thank you for having me here today. So this is Jennifer Gosar. I'm calling in today to express my concern that police accountability in Seattle has, since its inception, been essentially had three ineffectual bodies: the OIG, the OPA, and also not only but the current but the past iterations of the CPC. At no time can we celebrate any particular practices or policy changes significant to impact or reduce the amount of deaths at the hands of Seattle police, nor diminishing brutality tactics. Furthermore, the conflicts and corruptions between the OIG and the OPA, I mean, to look at the departmental updates, it surprised me to see on the agenda something so benign, really considering the fact that these scandals are of critical and paramount, concern. Furthermore, to look at policy updates and practices, I can't name one for you in the 5-6 years that I've been following CPC. I can't name one SPD practice or policy change that's actually been significant or impacted or reduced brutality or violence in the Seattle area. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason Sykes. Thank you for having me. I see that we're receiving updates from the Office of Inspector General today, as well as the OPA. And I'm sure, like many of you, I read the South Seattle Emerald article that detailed some really troubling allegations from a whistleblower complaint as to how the OIG does its job with the OPA. The OIG is supposed to oversee the OPA on our behalf as citizens. And according to the whistleblower's complaint, the OIG seems more concerned with protecting the OPA and shielding it from public scrutiny. Specifically, I'd be very curious if this commission would follow up and press the representative from the OIG as to whether or not the whistleblower's allegations of directing investigators not to put criticisms of the OPA in writing is true. It's a very simple straightforward allegation that the Office of Inspector General is telling its investigators not to put anything negative about the OPA in writing, so that if anyone were to file a public records request, there wouldn't be a paper trail of any criticism of the OPA. That's an absurd policy if you are really trying to hold an agency accountable and audit them. And this is the first time that a member of the OIG has appeared before a public commission since that story broke. And I would urge the commission respectfully to ask them to address that allegation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jason. Julie, are you here?
Yes, hi. My name is Julie Buona. I'm commenting on the reports from OPA and OIG. City Council is going into budget season where they will be considering the mayor's budget and other community-driven budgets, such as the solidarity budget, to determine next year's city budget. Every year, we spend over $10 million for the city's, quote, accountability system, the CPC, OIG, and the OPA, and probably tens of millions more through SPD and the city attorney's office to create an illusion of police accountability, while SPD continues to harm, harass, brutalize, and murder people with total impunity. It's clear that the system does not work. As Jason just mentioned, the South Seattle article that makes it clear that the OPA and the OIG are working together to suppress victims of police brutality and protect officers. We need to defund these systems, have an open public forum to determine why they have failed, and start redirecting funds towards full civilian community control over police policy, misconduct investigations, and discipline. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. We're going to go back to Mark. Mark, are you here? All right. That will conclude public comment if Mark's not here.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you all for providing public comment. We are now ready. Oh,
I have a comment. Yeah, I wanted to ask the executive. I mean, Brandy, our executive. Isn't it so that if there's an allegation of that was just mentioned by public on public comment, isn't that being investigated by the ethics committee? And that I'm just was my understanding that until that investigation is completed, then the CPC would not have any comment until that investigation is completed. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, Reverend Walden, that is a correct understanding. And a couple of meetings back, we actually stated that publicly.
Right.
We were tracking it. We understand the seriousness of
That's
it.
right.
But at this time, we could not comment on
That's right.
an open investigation.
That's right. That's right. I just wanted to make sure for the public who actually are listening to public comment that we've already stated that, and that is probably what is happening, and it is being investigated on the ethics committee. That's what their job is to investigate that. We are not an investigative agency to anything in the city. So just wanted to just have a little pushback on that, just to be able to say what the rules are. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Reverend Walden. Okay, we are now ready to move into department updates. Is there anyone from City Council to provide an update?
Yes, this is New Aldrich from Councilmember Herbold's office. Thank you to the new co-chairs. Just a couple of updates. First is that, as I believe I mentioned earlier, the first portion of work after the council's adoption of the less lethal ordinance is in effect. That's the 60-day period for SPD to draft policy revisions before DOJ and monitor review. As a number of people mentioned during public comment, the council is now meeting as the budget committee to consider the 2022 budget. Last week, there was a presentations on a series of department budgets. I believe the SPD budget and a community safety presentation were both on Thursday. Next week, there's going to be a public hearing on Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. with Senate beginning on 3:30 for a public hearing on the proposed budget. It's the first of 3 public hearings. The other 2 are scheduled for November. And the meetings of the budget committee that are going to take place next week after the hearing from Wednesday the 13th through Friday the 15th will be issue identification. In issue identification, council central staff examines the budgets of various departments and raises potential issues. This year's process was a little different than last year because last year council members as individuals could put forward proposals within issue identification. That's not the case this year. It's a little less work for central staff. That took a lot of time. So council members can raise issues for potential amendments verbally. To propose a formal amendment, any council member will need to have 2 other council members supporting it for 3 co-sponsors, and the deadline is October 18th for that. And I believe that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have an update from the mayor's office? From the monitoring team, do we have an update?
Good morning, Ms. Seibel.
Morning.
Since the last meeting of the Community Police Commission, the monitoring team has attended and been present at the SPD African American Advisory Council meeting, in which presentations were made by at-large city council candidate Sarah Nelson and by city attorney candidate Ann Davidson. We have participated in 2 meetings with the Seattle Police Department focused on data production, use of force, and the recently passed less lethal weapons legislation. We have met with DOJ on methodology for collection of SPD use of force data, and with OIG on their forthcoming discipline accountability audit, disparity, and a significant events review wave 2 report. That concludes my report on the monitor team activities.
Thank you very much for your update. Is there anyone from the Office of Inspector General here to provide an update this morning?
I'm sure. Good morning, CPC. On the questions that have been raised so far, we are happy to meet with the co-chairs and executive director and any of your members to provide you with an update. So I look forward to that conversation. We don't have any project updates at this time. And so hopefully, to the extent that there are further questions, we expect and hope that our Inspector General will be able to be back with you for the next meeting.
Great, thank you very much. The Office of Police Accountability, do we have a department update? I also acknowledge we will have a larger discussion as our next agenda item, but is there a department update for now?
No, just that we're working with the CPC on the manual, and I think we have a meeting set up hopefully next week, or I think next week, to discuss the CPC's edits and to try to reach a place of consensus before we get it out to the court.
Great, thank you very much. Oh, Douglas.
Thanks. Just really quick, Amy, thank you so much for being here and for that update. I just wanted to say it would be great if we could bring, if it's consistent with like policy or whatnot, if we can bring kind of those updates, for the future into the full commission meeting, just so other commissioners can be a part of the conversation.
Thank you. And lastly, do we have a department update from the Seattle Police Department?
Not at this time. I'll probably cover a lot of the stuff in just a few minutes.
Great, thank you, Chief Diaz. Okay, well then with that, we can move into our next agenda item unless there are any other questions on department updates. Great.
Catherine,
Okay.
I just wanted to say I'm here for DOJ, so I don't have a particular update, but I am here if you guys have questions. And I know we're planning to meet, I think, on the 21st to do sort of a briefing on the consent decree and talk about sort of the status. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. I'm looking forward to that too. And I apologize that I missed you earlier. Thank you for.
No worries.
All right. One last check. Is there any other questions or updates that I might have missed? Okay. Thank you all. Okay, so moving into our discussion, we are really grateful to have both Chief Diaz joining us as well as OPA Director Meyerberg here to discuss recent police shooting investigations, SPD policy updates, and crowd control weapons legislation. Chief Diaz and Director Meyerberg, thank you both so much for joining us here today. We would like to provide time to be sure to hear from both of you directly and the commissioner's respective questions. So we will start with questions for or from the commission for Chief Diaz, and then in roughly 20 minutes or so, we'll turn to commissioner's questions for Director Meyerberg and try to wrap up by 10:15 to respect everyone's time. Co-chairs are happy to start off with a few questions, and then we really want to be sure to open it up to hear from the full commission as well for questions from other commissioners. Douglas, would you like to start with your question for Chief Diaz?
Sure. Chief Diaz, again, thank you for being here. So the OPA recently released its investigation into the deadly Seattle police shooting on February 9th in the Central District. And as you know, the investigation found that the officers involved in the shooting failed to bring any of his less lethal tools, including the 40mm launcher, which SPD and others have said are necessary to respond to situations like this. But in terms of the actual consequences and the discipline that resulted from this incident, you know, the result was just a written reprimand. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of walk us through your thought process in how you reached that conclusion that a written reprimand was the appropriate consequence in this situation.
And I apologize, which specific incident is this one?
This is the February 9th shooting that took place in the Central District, February 9, 2021.
Andrew, by any chance, has it even come on my desk yet? Because I don't know if this one's coming off my desk.
Yeah, so just a frame of reference to the group. Generally, the way the disciplinary process works is that if a case is a reprimand, like this case, the reprimand is decided by the discipline committee and it's opined on by an assistant chief. The chief would not see this case down the road. I mean, the chief would be aware of it most likely at some point, but this is not a reprimand that the chief would have signed off on. So the cases that go before the chief are 1 day or more. So anything that goes to a ladder mill will go before Chief Diaz. Otherwise, reprimands are delegated to an assistant chief. So Douglas, I can probably answer, again, I can't speak for the department, but I can probably answer this question, I think, better than the chief can.
Thank you.
Please.
Yeah. So basically, like all cases, when we're looking at conduct, when we're looking at discipline, we look at first, what's the underlying conduct? And second, what are the past comparable cases? So here, what we had was we had a situation where officers, particularly this officer, were dispatched to a shots fired call. They believe that there were shots fired in the location, and officers rushed out of the precinct. And this is what this officer described, and it's supported by the video and by other documentary evidence that he rushes out of the precinct. And in doing so, he leaves his 40mm in his locker. So when he arrives at the scene, officers have responded. The individual comes around the corner with a firearm that's pointed up, and people fire their handguns at the individual. So the question for us was here, what level of culpability did he have for failing to bring his 40mm to the scene? Of course, it violates policy, right? You have to have your 40mm. The policy says that any officer that's trained and qualified owner of 40mm has to dispatch with that 40mm. But We also factored in that it was an exigent situation, that the officer was trying to get out of the precinct because he was worried that there weren't enough other officers responding. So in that respect, his misconduct in our minds was mitigated. One past precedent that we had to look at that was comparable was an officer-involved shooting, the Charlene Lau shooting that occurred in the case was in 2017, where an officer did not deploy with a taser. And in that case, the officer's taser was not functional, and instead of reporting it, the officer kept the taser in his locker. That officer received a suspension. So when comparing the two cases, we felt like the Lau's case was significantly more egregious because the taser was deactivated. The officer took no steps to try to remedy the problems with the taser, and then left it in his locker without notifying anyone. It also wasn't an exigent circumstance where the call that they were responding to, the initial call at Ms. Laus's apartment, was not exigent. It was a completed burglary call. Versus here, officers were responding to a shots fired call, which was significantly more exigent. So that's what played into the decision to have the discipline be lower than it was in the Lyles case. So again, there's a number of factors we look at, and we also looked at the past history of this officer. There were no past violations that were similar, so thus there would be no comparable cases that would have led to a higher disciplinary range. So that's why we reached the finding. Secondary to the finding was that in this situation, a 40 millimeter likely would not have been used, given that once the individual came around the corner, the firearm was raised, and the officers responded to that threat. So again, that's not the first and foremost in our minds, but that's a factor that plays into the decision making.
And yes, and I apologize for not having, sometimes there are quite a few, as Director Meyerberg noted, there's quite a few cases that will not reach my desk for higher levels of discipline, usually typically 1 day or more, so.
This is a case, I'll just note for the record that this is a case where the officer has requested a loudermilk. So, and that was granted, I believe, Chief. So this will be coming to you down the road to sit on and opine on. So, and usually reprimand cases don't go to a loudermilk, but officers can request it in some cases.
What does the word exigent mean that you said? You used that word twice.
Sorry.
More than once.
Yeah, what I mean by that is that there are circumstances that warrant a very quick response, meaning that, like, for example, like anytime there's a shots fired call, whether it's an officer shots fired call or that officers are responding to shots that were fired in the neighborhood or someone that was hit by gunfire, you would have an exigent response, meaning that they would move very, very quickly. So it's kind of drop everything and go. And that was the situation that this officer described being in, where he was at the precinct. His call comes out of the radio about someone being shot in the parking lot, and he runs out of the door and leaves his 40 millimeter in his locker.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a clarifying question that I'd love to learn more and just to help understand better. Is there a policy matrix of sorts or something that determines the initial decision for the discipline that meets the for each case? Or where does that initial decision come from for the level of discipline?
Yes. So we do not have a discipline matrix. It's something that we've considered over time. Some jurisdictions do. Seattle has never had one. And there's been, I have a crying baby. There's differing opinions as to whether or not it's a good idea. More and more, I do like the concept, but it takes a lot of work to develop the matrix. And even within the matrix, there can be sometimes a lack of flexibility because it's pretty rote as to what you can and can't impose. But to your point, I think to your bigger question is, so to your bigger question, sorry, this is my house in a nutshell. It's chaos at all times, so I apologize.
Babies do it, babies do that.
Well, my daughter was supposed to be the calm one, and she's very, very loud, and she yells constantly. So this is my experience. So basically now what happens is that when a case is sent through to the chain of command that has a sustained finding, the city attorney's office has a liaison, a labor and employment attorney that works with all of us. And what that attorney will do is they'll pull past comparable cases. So they'll look at, what are the cases that have occurred over the last 5 to 7 years that have similar facts and circumstances. And it's not perfect, so that's why they pull multiple cases. And so I have obviously an institutional memory over the last 4.5 years of discipline and cases that I've looked at, but even beyond that, the lawyer will provide these cases and everyone involved with the discipline committee. So it's me, the lawyer, an assistant chief, a captain, and potentially an HR representative will go through these cases and to say, okay, how are they the same? How are they different? And are there either exacerbating or mitigating factors that would move us one way or the other? And then at that point, we provide a range in most cases to the chief of police to say, okay, here's the range of discipline that you could impose. And that sets the stage for the Loudermill hearing. And that is what can be discussed at that hearing, where an officer can say, well, I think it should be lower, higher, no discipline at all. I think what we've seen is there's pluses and minuses to both systems, to both the disciplinary matrix and the system that's used in Seattle. And these systems are kind of evenly dispersed across the country. So there's not one that's, I think, more popular than the others, but it's certainly something that we talked to the CPC about. We considered it when the accountability ordinance was getting off the ground, of discipline matrix. But that's generally how disciplinary decisions are issued.
Great, thank you so much for that. I have another question for Chief Diaz, but I want to be mindful to not take up too much space. So do other commissioners have a question? And if not, I'm happy to ask, but I want to be sure that this is covered.
Mark, do you have any questions? Mark Mullins.
How did you know?
I know, prognosticating.
I would like to ask now, is it not true that the 40 millimeter is banned right now?
That is not true. We are, it is something that we have pushed to move forward on, based on HB 1054. There was some questions with the plain language of 1054 that made people a little hesitant to carry the 40 millimeter. King County, because of that plain language, has decided not to have that be deployed in the field. For us, when talking with the state legislators, Legislator Johnson, Goodman, their push was to encourage the use of less lethals rather than having just a lethal use of force, and 40 millimeters fit that. And so we have said that 40 mil is allowed based on what we interpret HB 1310 and 1054. But some officers have turned in the 40 mil as of hesitation because when it comes to SB 5051, which is a decertification bill, if you are found in violation of some level of excessive force, you could be decertified. And so some officers have felt that to save themselves, they just decided to not have the 40 mil, but it actually, based on what we have learned from the legislation and the way we interpret the law, 40 mil is actually a legal, it fits in the legal concepts of what we're doing when it comes to the law. So I know that created a lot of confusion. And I think, we've had a lot of discussion with, legal advisors across the state. Andrew Meyerberg's Director Meyerberg's been part of the discussion on some of the SB 5051 stuff and how to interpret the excessive force legislation. So, but that gives you some context to the 40 mil.
Just to piggyback on that, Mark, is that we also spoke pretty extensively with the CJTC, and the CJTC put out guidance that explicitly said that there are two interpretations of the bill, both of which are legitimate pending legislative changes, and one of the interpretations is aligned with SPD's view that the 40 millimeter is still an acceptable, less lethal tool at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Chief Diaz, I was curious around de-escalation. The CPC, along with OPA and OIG, expressed a really great interest in supporting and improving SPD's de-escalation policies and practices. But there have been a growing number of cases in Seattle in which police officers have killed people in mental health crises armed with non-firearm weapons like knives, or in which there have been officers that haven't been able to deploy their less lethal weapons. So I was curious to learn a little bit more about what SPD is doing to strengthen de-escalation policies and practices. And again, this is something we would love to be involved in and support. So is there any way for the CPC to be involved?
Yeah, so, our focus of the training that we do in relation to people in crisis, but people sometimes in crisis that are armed, our focus is time, distance, and shielding. Those are kind of our three principal factors. In it, we know that if we have time, we have options. If we create distance, we have options. And if we also use what we call shielding, that of a vehicle or that of a building, again, we have options. And that when you have options, you have typically a safer outcome, as opposed to not having those three factors. And so what we've been doing is we've been conducting the following, training. We had launched earlier this summer, or actually at the very beginning of the summer, a training that's specifically focused on dealing with people armed with knives. We have done that training session with our personnel that has already concluded. We are conducting scenario-based training with this topic. One of the training environments that we've noticed that creates sometimes an issue is as people move through different locations. So in a situation where you're dealing with a person in crisis and they start moving down the street, down the block, that becomes sometimes things that you have to be aware of, where you're coming in contact with community, coming in contact with busy intersections, etc. And that is some of the training that will be focused on, the scenario-based training that we will be launching pretty soon, within the next month or so. And then we're also conducting the training in areas of crisis. So we've been working with CJTC. We do provide crisis intervention training, and that also has a de-escalation component to it. This is state mandated training. So that is something that, we're trying to still make sure that we're still in compliance with the state certifications of CIT. But also this year we launched the ABLE training, which is the active bystander for law enforcement training, which not only includes de-escalation, but really focuses on intervention training. So when an officer sees an officer going down the wrong path, maybe not de-escalating, for an officer to intervene in that. And so that is one that we're getting all of our officers trained throughout the whole department. I think a majority of our officers are already ABLE trained, but I think we just have a few more classes left. We've also been conducting what we call 30 minutes to 30 years training. And this training has really focused on the concepts of kind of growth mindset and outward mindset and relational policing. And I think for as I envision how we move the department forward is really trying to focus on kind of a people-centered approach and how we build relationships and how we build connections with community. And I think this is, as we kind of launch that kind of concept, that growth mindset, the ability to problem solve, the ability to develop relationships and connections, all of that will have a component of de-escalation. We've had actually a couple, I think there's been several cases just in the last couple of months of dealing with people and knives where we've had a lot safer outcome. And each situation is different. So it's not like that's going to be the path forward, that we're never going to have an officer involved shooting. But I think that officers are really taking, to heart, like trying to make sure that they're doing everything they can to de-escalate. We had literally just about a week ago, a person in the Starbucks that, pulled a knife on one of the workers, and officers were able to de-escalate it and take the subject to, get the needs being met that he needed. So that is kind of the concept of it. We're also, and I think this is where CPC has been also at the table. We have been looking at less lethal, some of the less lethal tools that we have. Bolo wrap. We did a kind of a show and tell about some of the different less lethals just about 4 months ago or 5 months ago. We had members of the CPC there. We are moving forward on the Bolo Wrap as being another tool for officers. I just actually met today with the Bolo Wrap producers. They just are finalizing their new product that we look to potentially deploy about 30 Bolo Wrap devices. And we probably are going to start off with our crisis intervention team, our crisis response unit, because that is, they're constantly responding to people in crisis. And so that would be a first kind of step into using some sort of less lethal. And what we would also be working with the CPC and some of our accountability partners is trying to make sure that we have a policy when we bring in a new tool, that the policy, reflects some of the concerns of what the community is noting. And then I think that will help with just getting a different perspective for our officers and how they deploy some of their tools.
So just to chime in real quick. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Director Marburg. I had a follow-up question, but I'll.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, this was, the changes that are happening right now are very much in line with what we were hoping we would see when we issued the management action in the Terry Caver shooting, was to develop more of a robust training, particularly around the scenarios like Chief Diaz said about people that are moving. Most of the scenarios all the scenarios that are trained right now by SPD are in an annex or in a big classroom. So you may have situations where an officer is like moving towards someone in a quick fashion, but not in the same kind of outside environment with all the different stimuli that are going on. So we're excited to see this develop and this type of training take place. And hopefully it's going to continue to grow, where we really do want it to be, from OPA's perspective, to be outside, to be somewhere different, and to have all these officers, or all patrol officers at least, get reps in doing so. We're also supportive of the Bolo Wrap. We don't know how it's going to work. I mean, there's a lot of kind of what ifs with the Bolo Wrap. There has to be enough space around an officer or around the subject for it to work, or else it's going to catch on something and it won't go around somebody. But I think even if it's used as a distraction, that's still more time to allow officers to make a decision and to go hands-on. So largely positive, and hopefully, technology will come with it more, a lot of other different tools that we haven't even thought of yet. So that's our hope. Sorry, Austin.
Sure. So I have a two-part question, with the first part being for Chief Diaz and the second part being for Director Meyerberg. These trainings, are these being codified as policy? Are we sort of instituting affirmative requirements to de-escalate and intervene if another officer fails to de-escalate? And then the part for Director Meyerberg would be that if these policies are being created, how does that relate to your use of past comparable cases? Because if we're creating new policies that create new requirements, then past comparable cases really aren't a very good tool for evaluating discipline in cases where new policies and new requirements are violated. So first, are there new policies? And second, how would that play into discipline recommendation?
So the training reinforces the policies, but our policies are now in alignment with HB 1310, and because there's a couple of components. There's also an ABLE, which is the active bystander for law enforcement training. There is like an intervention training that was required out of the HB laws that were recently passed. We already had started moving forward this year with the ABLE training to make sure that all of our officers are going through and doing some level of intervention. But one of the, in the HB 1310, there is a emphasis on de-escalation. Our policies are in alignment with that level of de-escalation. We are making sure that our training is reinforcing that level of de-escalation, that making sure that we're, going through all of the tools that we have available to try and see, is there another method to actually resolve the situation? And so that is kind of right now, as we move forward, some of these trainings is trying to make sure that last year we had to put a halt on training because of kind of our cuts that we experienced in the budget. And these are all perishable skills. And so now that we're back up in training and actually reinforcing this, it just falls in alignment with a lot of our policies.
So if an officer were found to have escalated or failed to intervene when another officer was escalating a situation, they would violate SPD policy.
Yes, and they would, you know, and that's where it would come to Andrew's shop, our Director Meyerberg's shop, and then it could, depending on the extent of the violation, could end up, you know, coming either through a written reprimand or up to the chief's office for potential level of discipline, depending on the extent of it.
So Austin, to your second question, which I think is a good one, it's nuanced, is, well, first, as a general matter, training is not codified in policy. So policy and training are different. And you know this, but I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview where policy sets forth the general parameters. For example, like you have to de-escalate until it's no longer safe or feasible, and you must use time, distance, and shielding. That's the policy. How to do that is carried out in the training. So the different steps you would take and the different scenarios you were faced would be called out in the training. So where there are changes in the policy, I mean, this happens all the time where there may be adoptions in policy. So for example, in the aftermath of the protests in the summer of 2020, there's been a number of changes that have either altered, finessed, or modified crowd management policies. You know, there was a lot of cases that came out a couple years ago about the K-9 unit. The OIG did an audit, we had issued management actions, and the policies had changed pretty substantially in the context of K-9s. However, de-escalation is still de-escalation, and out of policy force is still out of policy force. So that wouldn't change as much. So we would be using the same comps for de-escalation and force as we would have used despite the changes. With regard to the failure to intervene, that would be a new policy. So anything that's brought in because of EPIC will have to be a new policy, or at least will have to be amplified in the current chapters. If that is created, then for sure you're correct that we will have no comps for that. We would have to start and create comps as we go. And the thing about that is that, you know, ultimately the chief can create those comps, right? The chief will get to decide, okay, what are the parameters going to be, and that we would go from the chief's lead. So in some respects, it's the chief has discretion to be able to set those comps, and we will talk to the chief about what those comps will look like for the failure to intervene cases. But otherwise, a change in policy, for example, or a change in training, for example, these outdoor trainings, they wouldn't affect the comparable cases, but they would potentially affect the expectations held for officers, given that the training is more robust. And the excuse cannot be, well, I was never trained on this type of situation. You are. And then the expectations will be higher. So I don't know if that answers your question, Austin, and I can clarify if there's any other issues that are outstanding.
My one follow-up would be in terms of the chief having the discretion to create new comps for something like a failure to intervene. Would that be released publicly? Would you know, these kinds of new comps and guidelines and things like that, would that be something that we at the CPC would have access to and that the public would have access to?
Yeah, I mean, one big gap, obviously the reason we're having this conversation is that people don't understand how discipline is imposed and what people base that determination on, right? I mean, I think that's just a fact. That's why we're all here. I think it would be very, and again, that's the beauty of a discipline matrix. When people talk about discipline matrices, is that you can, it's clear, right? You have this chart that says, okay, if it's this, then it's that. I think there are ways to more fully express the various discipline that's imposed for cases, whether or not we create a dashboard, whether or not we create some sort of an FAQ on our website. But there's no reason why the chief could not come out and say, I'm going to be handling these cases differently, or I will be imposing, you know, here's the disciplinary range that I will consider for any failures to comply with this policy. There's no limitation on the chief doing that. I mean, the only limitation would be that you wouldn't want to prejudge cases. So you wouldn't want to say, well, a case is pending, well, I'm going to issue a 5-day suspension. But giving a general range and a general concept as to how the comps are going to change is a good idea in a lot of ways, because it puts people on notice of what their conduct could result in. So I think my answer to your question is yes.
I think we need general ranges very badly, because the public really has no understanding of how discipline decisions are arrived at, or what the possible ranges for a wide variety of policy violations are. So having publicly available information like that to work off would be extremely helpful, especially for folks who want to push for changes to those ranges.
What I would say then is that potentially we're back in the world of a discipline matrix. So it may very well be that CPC in one of your work groups evaluates, I mean, I think what we never really did was and this was even in May of 2017 when the accountability ordinance was passed, we really haven't done a deep dive to look at, okay, if you were going to do it, how would you do it? And then to actually bring it to our system and to see if it's viable and what kind of time it would take to do and whether it would actually be something that we would all want at the end of the day. But I would strongly recommend that the CPC consider this. I'm happy to work with you all to talk it through and how I would do it and what I would see happening. But I think the cleanest way, if the concern is public perception and public understanding of disciplinary ranges and how they're reached, I think a discipline matrix could be the way forward.
Yeah, I mean, that as far as making that product, that seems like something that the CPC can help disseminate, but I think making that product would be probably more from your office's end, since y'all are the subject matter experts on that.
It is, but I think it's a systemic decision as to whether to move forward with that, because there are pluses and minuses with the discipline matrix that I think we should all be on the same page on before it's rolled out.
Yeah, I think on any next steps and these related policies, practices, and trainings, we would love to be involved and included in this way, especially around de-escalation too. I think that would be something the CPC would really love to be involved in. So thank you. I saw Director Grant, you had your hand up. Do you still have a question?
Yes, it's kind of a combination of a question and a comment. Chief Diaz, thank you for referencing the demonstration that we were invited to come to last year, right? At the end of last year. I would love for us to begin conversations about how we can replicate that for community members and for the full CPC. And, just some thoughts about that. We had given feedback about the folks that got to participate in that. I think it is crucial that community members, especially, but CPC, other commissioners get a chance to see that. So when we're making recommendations and policy revisions, we're able to do so in an informed manner. Going to that changed a bit of the trajectory of some of the feedback that I had provided in the past, because I actually got to see how tools were being deployed and the purpose of them, even though I still had some concerns, but it gave me a better lens to have the opportunity to see it. So I would love to revisit the conversation about that. And then I know our community engagement director recently reached out to the CIT folks. So myself and Catherine, one of our co-chairs, would be able to be a part of some of those conversations. And so I know there's reference made about, the CPC's involvement. I really want to push to make sure that we're actually getting to do that. And I know you're open to it, Chief Diaz, but just want to build some momentum around making sure that we, get the opportunity to participate in those trainings. You mentioned many 30-minute years, the de-escalation trainings. I think it would be not even just a unique opportunity. I just think it would give us an opportunity to have some more informed decisions, especially when we're communicating to the public about things, and then we're able to dispel some of the incorrect narratives that are being put out about the work that we do. So thank you.
No, thank you. And I'll make sure, I think you're right. Having just one of the things that I did when I was in collaborative policing, actually in community outreach, we actually did host trainings that were stuff that officers were going through. So we did raise power of illusion for the community and other groups, and we've actually highlighted some of the trainings so people can participate in it, just so they understand what the officers are being trained in. And so I think that would be a great opportunity for us just to get some feedback and ideas and thoughts while just highlighting some of the training that officers are routinely going through.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Oh, go ahead, Reverend Walden.
Oh, I think I have a question, and I think this is for the chief. In August, the city passed the legislation limiting SPD use of certain crowd-controlled weapons, including the blast balls. And under the consent decree process, SPD has 60 days to provide policy to the federal court and how it's planned to implement the new legislation. What is your progress on those policy changes, and how do you plan to involve the CPC or the community at large in the review?
Yeah, so right now we have been working just to kind of deconflict several different things. So right now there is the HB 1054, which is what we call a tactics bill that really is trying to ensure that we have more or less lethal options in what we deploy with and how we deploy it. And along with that, it's ratified with the 1310 legislation, which is focused on use of force. And so in the 1054, there is a discussion of use of blast balls and some of the other different less lethal tools. Then we have the city legislation that says we don't want the officers to use blast balls and some of the other different tools, or it puts a restriction on who can use it, which does, so one of the things it said, it wants SWAT officers to use that. We have been really trying to get away from the use of having SWAT officers in a crowd management type of situation. The SWAT officer's focus is when you have a barricaded situation or stuff that is a long-term conflict that is something that is potentially armed with weapons and different other things, and using hostage negotiation. They're really not designed for a crowd management perspective. And so and this is something that I've discussed or had a discussion with the council member as well. And then coupled with that, we also, in our Sentinel review, there was one of the recommendations was to reduce the use or having a presence of a baton in a crowd management perspective. And so if we were to look at not having a baton, not having other less lethal tools in a crowd management situation, we would literally find ourselves, really only having higher levels of force tools, and that isn't something that the community should expect. We have done work on really trying to, de-escalate a lot of situations in crowd management over the last year. We have not thrown a blast ball since, over a year now, September 26th. And I think a lot of that is just how we change the tactics, how we are adapting to the responses. We've still made arrests in some of the crowd management situations, but we've been very targeted, really focused on those that are doing, property destruction or assaults. And so right now we're trying to work with our legal side to really kind of deconflict all of the different legislations. And we know that the HBs, the House bills, will potentially see some modification, and then how that will play a role into the city legislation as well.
Thank you so much.
I want to flag we have a little less than 10 minutes left. And so if commissioners have questions specific for Director Meyerberg and OPA, please, I just wanted to put that on everyone's radar. And again, thank you for the discussion. And we have about 10 minutes left.
I have something I'd like to bring up, if you don't mind. It's probably not on the topics, but I do think this is something that I think, I would like to have CPC involved with. Right now, when it comes to when we hire an applicant, we start them off at the academy, and it's been this concept that we are training people to be guardians and not warriors. And, however, we're still grading people on the same things in the academy. And so I have been a little reluctant to, I really want to not just look at the academy, but expand the training concept of what we're doing. So one of the things that right now we're building is what I refer to as relational policing model. And this is probably one of the biggest transformations that I think in policing that it could be. And it really focuses on hiring brand new applicants 45 days prior to the academy, where we would focus them on community-centered dialogue and learning. In that community-centered dialogue learning, we would focus on social emotional learning, brain development, trauma-informed practices. And these are all areas that I think will help in later on in the course of their career do a lot more de-escalation and a lot more empathy training as well. And then coupled with that, we also know that some of this work would also be grounded in officer wellness and growth mindset, because what we find is that over the course of an officer's career, the trauma that they see every single day, they don't have that resiliency built up. They will find themselves in a, probably sitting in front of myself and Andrew Meyerberg in some level of discipline. And so it will have some grounding in that officer wellness component, as well as, what we call public safety 360, which is really trying to give the brand new recruit a whole exposure to the criminal justice system and what it entails, and understanding the defense side, and understanding the prosecution side, and understanding the people side. And so it is something that in that 45 days we have we actually have contracted with a local educator that is a principal, and I actually met her when she was a principal or a vice principal at Aki Kurosi. She has a lot of roots in Seattle, and she understands a lot in that social emotional learning capacity, because I think that there's so much to learn from that side, because when you're, for an educator that's dealing with kids in trauma on a daily basis, I think that it's important for our officers to understand in a better perspective of how they're dealing with people that are in trauma and every call that they're having to respond to. And so right now I've talked to agencies across the country, and no one is looking at it from this perspective. And I think that this is something that I would love CPC's involvement. I think it's also an area where it will help build a lot of bridges in community, because there's the contacts would be a lot better in the end. And I think it would also, help reduce potentially complaints. And so I think it's something that we will have to, it'll take time, but what we want to do is start working through the type of curriculum that we would end up building. And that I would love to launch at the very beginning of next year in some maybe smaller portions, and then eventually build it up into what I think will be needed for policing in general.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that update. It's really exciting to hear about social emotional learning and incorporating a trauma-informed approach in practice. So I think sounds really effective and sorely needed. So thank you for that update. I appreciate that. And to whatever extent, again, we can support with that effort, please do let us know.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from commissioners, the time that we have left?
ED Grant here. I just wanted to say, if there aren't any other questions, thank both Director Meyerberg and Chief Diaz for joining us for this robust conversation. And we look forward to being able to keep the lines of communication open. And should we have any more questions, I know we can always follow up and send them to you. I know, Chief Diaz, we have a tentative meeting between myself, you, and the new co-chairs, so we can also raise those questions at that time too. So commissioners, don't hesitate if you later think of questions or points of concern to raise, we can make sure that those are shared. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank
all.
you.
Thank you both so much.
Take care.
All right. Well, again, to echo Executive Director Grant, if you have any other additional comments or questions, please do let us know so that we can follow up. Thank you. I will pass it to Co-Chair Douglas. Would you like to take on the Community Police Commission updates?
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone who asked questions during that last section. So we're now going to move on to Executive Director and Co-Chair updates. Brandy, do you have updates you want to share, or we can jump into Co-Chair updates?
I can, and you all, I'm gonna try to turn my camera on. Hopefully I don't get disconnected. Okay. Yes, I do have a few updates, everybody. Good morning again. Wanted to let you know just kind of some primary work and things that I'm focusing on coming directly from the Executive Director's desk. I've been working recently with the FAS construction team regarding our new office space. Was able to get in and do a full view look at furniture, look at carpet, painting, all of that. And a lot of that construction had stopped due to COVID. And most of it will not resume until after the first of the year. But the individual that I'm working with mentioned that there obviously has been some cost increases during the time from when the construction process first started, which I believe was in 2019 to present date. So she is working to crunch some more numbers and will present that to me this week. And so I hope to have a report out regarding the office space as far as if there's any cost increase to us. This was something that was already being covered by the city, but I believe we're going to have a little bit of cost to incur. But I will definitely keep the commission apprised to that information. Currently doing a lot of prepping and coordinating to do an in-depth onboarding process with the new co-chairs, working with various facilitators. As Christina Fogg mentioned, they will be doing a kind of history of the consent decree litigation. We're going to be doing some stuff regarding the governance history, CPC, budget, media, and legal work. And so just specific to their special roles as co-chairs, you know, this was a very unique situation for us when we had folks step down. And so I had built an onboarding process during my interim days, but there needs to be a really efficient onboarding process for co-chairs. So this has allowed me an opportunity to work on that. And I'm still hammering out some details, but look forward to them having a really in-depth onboarding on October 21st. They've done an amazing job and I've really enjoyed working with them. This has not been a heavy lift at all. And so I hope they're enjoying their time so far. Couple of other things. I'm working with the community engagement director. We're going to be hosting a community conversation at the next community engagement meeting for community members and hopefully the majority of the original 35 signatories who brought the DOJ in to investigate SPD in 2010. We think I've thought this for quite some time that, you know, to have the connection with the folks that were courageous enough to bring the DOJ to town. I think it's important that community members and those signatories, along with the commission, have an opportunity to check in with the monitor who has graciously accepted that invitation. So next Tuesday, October 12th, there is an invitation that is pending, that is being sent out to folks currently. That Felicia and I have been working on for the last week or so. So I really encourage all commissioners to please participate and show up at the community engagement meeting next Tuesday. Annual report is officially complete. Final edits were done by the staff after our last CPC meeting, and I have to apologize because I've had quite a bit of plates in the air that it is still on me now to do the final review before going live, which I have committed to do before the end of the week. So I do want you to know that the team did an amazing job that has been done. It is now on me to do my final review. Last couple of things, working on drafting a preliminary language access plan. We're really excited for 2022 and hopefully we will be beyond what we're going through with this pandemic and just making sure that there is in-person and virtual accessibility and creating more opportunities for folks so that we don't have any language barriers, collateral materials, meetings that hopefully we'll be able to have face-to-face and different engagement opportunities. And then most importantly, I want to start talking about when I do my updates, highlighting special meetings that I've had. And I wanted to let the commission know that we had an amazing meeting with the Human Rights Commission and the brilliant folks over there to talk about kind of re-extending that bridge. We've always, as the commission, had a great relationship with HRC. And we were recently able to do a reintroduction and talk about potential work that we could do together and to discuss carving out 2022 work plans where there are opportunities for collaboration and overlap. Outside of that, I could probably talk you all's ear off about things that are going on, but those are the things that I felt were the most important that need to be highlighted this morning. If anybody has any questions for me or anything they want to raise, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. And if you have any questions for me, I'm here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brandy. A couple other co-chair updates. So since the last CPC meeting, we met with, we had our quarterly accountability partners meeting, and OPA, OIG, and SPD were there. A couple just quick updates from that. OPA is working to schedule meetings with each agency to discuss feedback on their draft manual. We invited at that meeting SPD to start coming regularly to our CPC meeting so that we can kind of get that regular dialogue going, and also invited them to come to our community engagement meetings. And I believe it's now this week that OIG is releasing their annual report. I'm kind of getting my days and weeks confused, so that may be last week, but their annual report is coming soon. And then lastly, in our meeting with the legal team from Sussman and Gottfried, we invited them and asked them to start carving out regular time at our Community Police Commission meetings to give a regular update to the commission about their work for the sake of transparency and bringing everyone on the commission into the fold in that work. So like one quick note about attendance, and this is more for the people that are not on this call per se, because the folks that we're talking to today are the folks that really come regularly to these meetings. So I guess I just want to start by saying thank you to the commissioners on this call for your engagement, being actively involved in the commission. Your work, ideas, questions are critical to us being able to move this work forward. And then on kind of attendance, work groups, the co-chairs are going to be going through the roster and scheduling individual calls with each of our commissioners to just do kind of a general check-in, as well as discuss opportunities to serve on various work groups and kind of see what you're excited about, which work groups are you a part of, does that feel good to you, as well as look for folks to step up. And so if you're interested in an opportunity to step up, we're looking for folks to co-lead both our state legislative agenda work group, which is going to help shape our strategy, focusing on the upcoming legislative session. And that was a really busy and exciting and interesting work group last year. There are opportunities for the whole commission to testify on various bills to the state legislature and the Senate and the House. And so we're looking for folks to co-lead that work group, as well as serve on the state legislative agenda work group. And then per conversations that commissioners have had, it sounds like there's interest in taking a look at the bylaws and potentially making revisions to the bylaws. And so we're looking for folks to serve on that work group, as well as look for someone to chair that work group. And if you have interest in revising the bylaws, you can go ahead and send that feedback or those edits that you'd like to see to co-chairs and to Brandy, and we can start collecting all of that and then sharing that with this new work group. But again, just want to thank everyone here for their regular attendance, participation in both the full commission meetings and our work groups. The work is critical, and there are a few folks who have missed several CPC meetings or many CPC meetings. And so it's not the folks on this call, but we're going to be, in our calls with commissioners, we're going to be kind of checking in and seeing where folks are at with, their engagement with the CPC moving forward. The last kind of big update is we met with with Connected Realities, which is the consulting group that is helping lead our and facilitate our strategic planning process. They gave us an update, which I'm guessing is coming to the full commission soon, which is kind of the results of all of their focus groups. So they talked about, they met with a variety of stakeholders and community partners, and based on the input they received from those folks, they created this matrix and document, kind of collating and synthesizing that feedback into strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it was interesting to hear, and I think will be illuminating for folks on this call, the kind of immediate next steps in this strategic planning process are to now bring the full commission into this, into the conversation a little bit further. And based on, you know, the focus groups, but also our individual commissioners' interests, we're now at this like pretty exciting and pivotal stage in the strategic planning process where we're aiming to wrap up the strategic planning by the end of the year. And this is now our opportunity as a full commission to articulate our values, interests, where we want the commission to go moving into 2022. As we heard, you know, in public comment, and as, you know, folks have expressed on the commission in the past year or so, you know, there's a lot of really pivotal conversations happening in the Seattle community right now. And how we fit into the future of police accountability in Seattle is really up to us. And so this next stage of the planning process is our opportunity to shape that conversation. And I don't know if Brandy, Reverend Walden, Catherine, if anyone wants to kind of add anything about the importance of this next stage, and if not, I can just kind of jump into seeing what folks think about scheduling like meetings to come together and have this discussion.
I just want to say how excited I am, and I want to make sure that you all feel excited about this new opportunity to take the commission, you know, set the tone and tenure for the future of the commission, right? To uphold all of the amazing work that the, you know, founders of this commission did, and then take it to the next level. And so I know on some level we've asked so much of everyone, but I'm just so crucially aware of the dynamic and really gracious folks that, you know, signed up as commissioners. And I'm really excited to see you all helping leading this charge. And we really need your help. And I feel like the sooner we're able to kind of get to this, the sooner we can get to the next steps of how great the CPC can really be. So there's going to be a little bit of sacrifice from everybody to be able to accomplish this, but we have a really great opportunity to start mapping out what we want 2022 and onward to look like. That's the only thing I'd like to add is just I'm excited, I'm hopeful, and I want to make sure you all are feeling the same way.
I agree with the director, the executive director, Brandy. I really do. I think this is an exciting time for the new commissioners. I mean, and taking it forward. You know, we hear a lot about what we haven't done, but then there's a lot about what we have done. And I think this having this process with these consultants is a great opportunity to move forward. I mean, now that we have another level to move to. So you know, nothing happens in a hurry, not in this line of work, but I'm just so happy that we're moving forward, and I'm happy about the excitement of commissioners just wanting to be engaged, and I know that they're gonna step up and we're gonna get this done like in a hurry. I'm excited.
Great, thank you so much. So what in practice, what this will look like is a series of strategic planning workshops. And they're recommending roughly 3-hour sessions over the next couple months, with the possibility that we could squeeze things into 5 sessions if necessary. And so we want your engagement and buy-in in deciding kind of what this might look like. And so the options that we're thinking of are fitting these into 3 consecutive days. So that would be, you know, 2 sessions roughly per day that are about 3 hours each, or spreading these 6 sessions out over 2 to 3 weeks. And so, you know, it's definitely a time commitment, but based on kind of what they're sharing, this seems like what is necessary from their perspective to have these critical conversations. And so we're hoping to hear from commissioners about which option you feel best for you in terms of, again, doing 6 3 or 3.5 hour sessions over 2 weeks, or completing all of these sessions in 3 days, doing two of them each day. And so I'll maybe pause there and see if there are any questions. And if there's not, then I'm just gonna like read down I'm gonna do a roll call vote, and we can just see whether folks would prefer doing this over, 2 or 3 consecutive days or doing this over 2 or 3 weeks. So I'll pause for questions.
This is Patricia Hunter. Douglas, you haven't mentioned time. That may make a big difference if we're talking about doing it during the daytime. Are we talking about evening meetings? That could make a difference. Any thoughts from the co-leads or the co-chair?
Reverend Hunter, we were just trying to determine a bit of like the duration that wanted to be spent, and get a feel from you all where you would like to be with again the 3 days or the 6 sessions of 3.5 hours, and then what they would do based on their based on that, then we could actually send something around to show the different blocks of time that it could be done.
Okay, thank you.
Just trying to simplify it was recommended that we simplify the process by trying to figure out like what would be the two, kind of narrow down the 2 options of how it could be done. And then it will be shared out, just the different blocks of time that could be done and sent around to you all in probably a doodle poll version.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, the times haven't been decided yet. So, we, like Brandy said, maybe a doodle poll would be the way we'd figure out the times. But again, the 2 kind of formats would be 6 sessions, about 3 hours each over roughly 3 days, or 6 sessions, roughly 3 hours spread over 2 to 3 weeks. Any other questions? Okay. Then let's just go down the roll, and I'll ask each person just to say whether they would prefer 3 days or 3 weeks. Maybe we can do it that way. So Asha's not here. Reverend Hunter.
3 weeks.
Suzette.
3 weeks.
I'm up next, and I haven't actually thought about what I would like. I think I would prefer 3 days. Prachi? Prachi still on the line?
Prachi was unable to attend today, Douglas.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Pinto, I don't think is here today. Austin?
3 weeks.
Reverend Walden?
3 weeks.
Catherine?
I am happy to do 3 weeks, though I would request that the times be in the evening because my day schedule is a little unflexible for the next 2 months. And if not, I'm happy to do 3 days over the weekend as well.
Joseph? Joseph, do you have a preference between strategic planning workshops over 3 days or 3 weeks?
No preferences, Douglas.
Thank you, Joseph. Esther?
Esther's not here. She's not here.
Oh, no, Esther did join. Let's see, can I ask Esther to unmute?
Oh, finally. Okay, sorry, I didn't have permissions to unmute. So here I am waving my hands wildly. I would prefer 3 days.
Okay. Legea, did Legea join? Oh, they did. Legea, do you have a preference? 3 days or 3 weeks for these strategic planning workshops?
I don't have a preference. I know I'm generally not available Tuesdays, like from 2 to 4. I don't know. This is in the morning, then no. But I have classes Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in the evenings. So
Okay, thank you.
thanks for asking.
Officer Mullins?
I think I prefer 3 weeks.
Thank you. Alina? Is Alina still on? Let's see. Not seeing Alina. Okay. Colleen's not here. Is Tasha on today?
I don't see Tasha Douglas, but
Okay.
it looked like LaJaya had her hand raised, but I don't know if they lowered it.
Oh yeah, Lashai, do you have a question or comment, or is that something else?
Yes, I think I heard your question wrong. Were you asking us a time period that we preferred?
It's more of a format because Reverend Hunter asked a question about the timing, and we haven't proposed or figured timing would work for commissioners. So we're not sure yet whether it'll be morning or evening, weekend or weekday. That'll be based on like a probable doodle poll that'll go around, but this is more about the format. So, the question is, would you prefer to knock out 3 or 3.5 hour strategic planning sessions over 3 days, or spread it out over 3 weeks?
Oh, I see.
Trying to make.
I see. Okay. Sorry about that. Would prefer 3 weeks, but
Okay.
I'm open to doing it over 3 days.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then lastly, Erica. Erica, are you on the call?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi.
Over 3 weeks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner, so much for helping us collectively figure out kind of what would work best for this group. There's a really clear majority for doing this over 3 weeks. So only 3 people suggested that the 3 days would be preferable. And one of those votes was for both options. There was no preference. So I think we can move forward with planning this over a series of weeks. And we'll work with the Connected Realities folks to send around a doodle poll or some other type of scheduling. Maybe we could also ask you, when we schedule these commissioner check-ins, but we'll figure out some sort of scheduling process to ask folks what time and days are possible and would work best for them, and appreciate your participation in advance in what will be, a relatively long or substantive process, but is, as Brandy and Reverend Walden said, is going to be an exciting one. We have a lot of new commissioners, a lot of new energy, and this is our opportunity to really articulate, what will be a new direction for the CPC. So moving on to new CPC business, does anyone have any new business to add? All right, hearing none, we'll go to work group updates. Starting off with the behavioral health work group.
Thanks. I can give the update since Dr. Pinto isn't here. I want to start off by giving a huge thank you to Nia, who's the staff for the behavioral health work group. She put together a work plan that was included in today's materials, and it came from the work group's last meeting, in which we reviewed OPA's investigation and recommendations through the MAR management action recommendations of the case of Mr. Caver. So the work group is planning to further address some of the patterns of discipline and mental health response in a variety of ways. And this includes providing a full report and analysis of the case, again, formally requesting to be included in some of the related policies and training updates and revisions, as well as an op-ed. And so more details will come as the work group makes progress in this work. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Police practices.
I couldn't go over another. So we police practices at our last meeting, we discussed kind of moving away from addressing individual SPD policies and focusing more on accountability, because without any kind of robust accountability mechanism, policies really aren't very effective. The other thing that we're looking at is we're concerned that with the current rhythm of OPA investigations and recommendations, that might be unintentionally incentivizing SPD to create vague policies in order to avoid officer discipline. So we want to look at some perverse incentives that are kind of accidentally created by the structure there and try to suggest methods for correcting those.
And I'll just follow up with that and say that our next meeting is October 12th at 1 p.m. And Daniel Ketchum and Brenna Rodwell will be our presenters. Everyone is welcome. They will be sharing their experiences last year in 2020 during the demonstrations. And that the letter that we began, it's still in process. The staff is helping us significantly with that. And so that is still on the table. So, and then that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Community engagement.
Brandy pretty much already gave the update, but once again, the community engagement meeting is this Tuesday coming up, October the 12th. And I am asking everyone who can to please try to attend. The monitor is graciously giving up his time to come, and we will hear from the original signatories as Brandy mentioned before. And I'm excited about the community engagement meetings. So I encourage especially all the commissioners to try to attend as much as you can, because we want to have work group updates and presentations and education going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. And then lastly, state legislative agenda.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to give a quick update, kind of a supplement to what Douglas was speaking about earlier. So the staff has put together a plan to move forward for the next upcoming legislative session. I'll share my screen very briefly just to go over what we foresee as our initial steps here. So we're hoping to select work group co-leads, determining a meeting schedule, and then we'll work to develop our legislative priorities, which will include collaborating with some of the same organizations that we worked with last year. So the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability, as well as the ACLU and the Office of Intergovernmental Relations. We're hoping to get, as we did last year, some presentations of legislative priorities from those groups. Then have a vote where the commission will determine what we will support moving forward in the session. We will identify commissioners to give statements as they did last year. And we're going to try to draft our statements early so that commissioners can have like more lead-in time and have an opportunity to really make the statements their own as they deliver them. And then January through March, I believe the session starts January 10th. We'll be participating in the session, and then we will, at the end of that, do a session wrap up like we did this year. So really looking forward to getting that work up and running again. And, you know, staff is just awaiting for co-leads to be assigned.
And again, if you're interested in co-leading that group, please reach out to the co-chairs and Brandy. It's a really exciting opportunity, and that group did a lot of work last year and helped pass a ton of legislation. So moving on really quickly, because we're kind of behind time. The mayor's candidate forum, we're unable, to work with both to find a time that worked for both campaigns that was really workable. And so instead of having a forum, one idea is to just create a list of questions for the candidates and then send that to the candidates and ask for their responses that we can then share publicly instead of doing a forum, because again, there wasn't really a time that worked for everyone. And so again, just kind of in the interest of time, I'm gonna suggest that we move forward with that, but briefly, if anyone has any ideas or alternatives, just want to give folks an opportunity to share those now. Okay, then let's plan to move forward with creating that list of questions for the two mayoral candidates, and then we will send those to their campaigns and they can respond, and then we can figure out a way to share those publicly. If you have a question that you would like to ask of the candidates, you can send those in to the co-chairs and Brandy. And I'm not sure exactly about timing, but we may have an opportunity to discuss this again at a future commission meeting. And we can move forward from there. So we're, I think, 5 minutes behind schedule. We were supposed to start executive session at 10:40 to get to have a discussion with our legal counsel about current litigation. So at this time, we can enter executive session and plan to come back as scheduled at 10:55. See if you can help us enter the.
Working on it right now.